Have you ever noticed this quiet pattern repeating itself in your life? You speak up more than others. You explain yourself clearly. You try to be open and genuine. Yet somehow your words don't carry weight. You show sincerity, but you're still overlooked. You give honesty, effort, and good intentions. And one day, a hard realization settles in. People don't respect you the way you expected they would. Not because you're a bad person, not because you're incapable or lacking intelligence, but because you're too readable. In the modern world, we are constantly encouraged to open up, to share everything, to be authentic at all times, to express every emotion as soon as it appears. It sounds healthy, even virtuous. But there is a colder truth hiding underneath that advice. The world does not reward transparency by default. It responds to perception, position, and quiet authority. You are not wounded because you are weak. You are wounded because you are exposed. Every time you complain in public, you frame yourself as someone life happens to. Every time you announce a plan before you've taken real action, you dilute your own momentum. Every unnecessary apology teaches people to see you as smaller than you are. Every glance you cast around the room, searching for approval, hands your confidence to someone else. These behaviors feel harmless, even polite. But together, they form a pattern of self-disarmament. Without realizing it, you are giving the world instructions on how to treat you. And the world listens. This video is not about becoming cold, distant, or manipulative. It is about learning restraint in a culture that mistakes exposure for strength. It's about understanding that privacy is not weakness and silence is not insecurity. It's about protecting your inner world so it stops being used against you in conversations, workplaces, and social spaces. If you've ever felt underestimated, quietly used, misjudged, or treated as less capable than you know you are, there is nothing wrong with you. You have simply been playing by rules that reward openness while punishing those who don't know when to hold back. This video exists to help you change that dynamic, not by becoming someone else, but by becoming harder to misuse. Rule 1. Never reveal your next move. This is a familiar pain, and it usually starts innocently. You share your plans with people around you. They smile, they praise you, they tell you it sounds impressive. And for a moment you feel lighter, almost accomplished. Then slowly, the drive fades. The urgency disappears. You stop pushing as hard as you once promised yourself you would. This isn't laziness. And it isn't a lack of discipline. It's your brain collecting the reward before the work is done. Publicly announcing your next move gives you the emotional payoff of progress without the cost of execution. Each time you say, "I'm about to start a business," "I'm going to change my life," or "I'm preparing a big turning point," you believe you are creating accountability. In reality, you are creating exposure. You give potential competitors time to adjust. You give envious or insecure people room to interfere. And most dangerously, you give yourself the illusion that something meaningful has already happened. Machiavelli understood this instinctively. Power does not thrive under full transparency. The moment your intentions are visible, they are no longer protected. Words invite opinions, doubts, and resistance, even from people who claim to support you. Silence, on the other hand, preserves energy. It keeps momentum intact. Think of the person who disappears for 6 months without explanation. No updates, no hints, no motivational speeches. Then they return transformed. A different body, a different income, a different presence in the room. That person doesn't need to convince anyone of anything. Their results speak with authority, and authority never needs narration. People are unsettled by what they can't track and impressed by what they can't predict. When you broadcast your plans, you turn a private mission into a public discussion. When you move quietly, you deny others access to your process. There is a reason serious people reveal outcomes, not intentions. Promises ask for belief. Results force recognition. Mystery builds pressure, and execution builds power. If you want to be taken seriously, stop explaining your future and start building it where no one can interrupt you. Rule 2. Never complain about your problems in public. Complaining feels like relief, but it quietly damages how people see you. It does not earn sympathy. It places you in the category of the weak. This is a painful truth most people learn too late. Those who don't care will tune out immediately, and those who listen often do so with a hidden sense of comfort that your situation is worse than theirs. When you complain publicly, you are sending signals far beyond your words. You are framing yourself as someone life happens to, not someone who directs their life. Even if your situation is genuinely difficult, perception does not pause to consider context. Leaders understand this instinctively. They do not advertise frustration, and they do not unload emotional weight onto anyone who happens to be nearby. They either endure quietly or they change the situation. There is no third path that preserves authority. Imagine two people who lose their jobs on the same day. One tells the story over and over, explaining how unfair it was, how incompetent management is, how unlucky they feel. The other simply says, "I'm reorganizing a few things right now," and keeps moving. Who feels stable? Who feels trustworthy? Who would you bet on recovering faster? Pain is unavoidable, but broadcasting pain is a choice. This does not mean suppressing emotions or pretending everything is fine. It means choosing where vulnerability belongs. Private conversations with a mentor, a close friend, or a professional build strength. Public complaining erodes it. There is a quiet respect reserved for people who carry pressure without leaking it everywhere. Composure under stress signals capability. Noise under stress signals loss of control. Machiavelli understood that misery repels while strength attracts. When you stop announcing your problems, people stop defining you by them. You regain space to act instead of explain. Suffering is not proof of effort, and struggle does not need an audience. Pain is not meant to be displayed. It is meant to be transformed. The strongest answer to "How are things going?" is often a calm pause and a simple "I'm moving forward." That response alone tells the world you are still in command. Rule 3. Never lose your composure in public. Anger feels powerful in the moment, but in reality it is a map that leads straight to your weakest points. The person who makes you lose control is not stronger than you, smarter than you, or more important than you. They have simply learned how to press a button you failed to guard. The instant your temper shows, the balance of power shifts. The one who shouts is judged, diminished, and quietly dismissed. The one who stays silent is watched carefully. Machiavelli understood this dynamic deeply. A person who cannot govern their own reactions will never be trusted to govern anything else. Public anger exposes your triggers, and once those triggers are visible, they can be used against you again and again. Think of a workplace, a meeting, or even a crowded street. A manager who yells, slams tables, or loses control may feel dominant, but behind their back, people smirk, joke, and wait for their next mistake. Compare that to the leader who goes quiet, who pauses, who looks directly without raising their voice. The room tightens. People become careful. Silence forces others to confront themselves. Losing composure turns you into entertainment. Keeping it turns you into a presence. This doesn't mean you feel nothing or accept disrespect. It means you delay response until you choose the moment. Emotional restraint buys you time, and time is power. When anger rises, the most strategic move is to do nothing at all. Let the heat pass. Let the other person fill the space with their own words. Very often, they will reveal far more than you ever could by reacting. Calmness under pressure signals strength, discipline, and self-command. Explosions signal instability. The world doesn't fear rage, it learns how to provoke it. What unsettles people is control without explanation. When you refuse to react, you deny others the reward they seek. You become difficult to manipulate, difficult to predict, and difficult to undermine. Silence at the right moment is not passivity. It is pure, concentrated power. Rule 4. Never apologize when it isn't necessary. An apology carries weight, and when you give it away casually, it stops protecting you. Many people apologize not because they've done something wrong, but because they've been conditioned to shrink. They say sorry for asking a question, for taking a moment of someone's time, for having an opinion, even for standing where they stand. Without realizing it, they're sending a quiet message. I'm beneath you. In public spaces, that message lands immediately. Apologizing when there is no fault signals submission, uncertainty, and low status. This doesn't mean you should never apologize. When you genuinely cause harm, a clear, sincere apology followed by correction builds trust. But unnecessary apologies do the opposite. They train others to see you as someone who accepts blame easily and occupies space reluctantly. Language shapes hierarchy. Small changes alter perception more than long explanations ever could. Compare "sorry I'm late" with "thank you for waiting." One frames you as guilty, the other acknowledges the other person without lowering yourself. Compare "sorry but I disagree" with "here's how I see it." One asks permission to exist, the other states reality calmly. The difference is subtle, but the effect is immediate. People with value don't apologize for breathing, thinking, or contributing. They understand that presence is not an inconvenience. Over-apologizing invites dominance. It encourages others to interrupt you, override you, or place responsibility on you by default. Confidence is not volume or aggression, it's steadiness. It's standing where you are without flinching. When you remove unnecessary apologies, your words become firmer, your posture changes, and your interactions shift. People listen more closely because you are no longer negotiating your right to be heard. Reserve apologies for real mistakes, deliver them once, and move forward. For everything else, occupy your space fully. Respect doesn't come from asking for forgiveness. It comes from acting as though you belong. Rule 5. Never reveal your financial situation. Money triggers some of the strongest, most irrational reactions in human behavior, which is exactly why exposing your financial reality in public is dangerous. If people believe you are struggling, they don't see context or effort. They see limitation, and limitation invites dismissal. If people believe you are doing very well, admiration rarely lasts long before it turns into comparison, and comparison breeds resentment. Both extremes put you at risk. Machiavelli understood this clearly. Envy creates silent enemies who smile while taking notes. Pity creates a softer danger, quiet contempt. Neither works in your favor. Intelligent people avoid both by remaining financially ambiguous. They don't boast about wins, and they don't narrate losses. They let others assume, never confirm. Think about how money changes conversations. Once your numbers are known, people recalibrate how they treat you. Some feel entitled to favors. Some feel justified in judging your choices. Some begin competing with you in their head. Privacy prevents all of that. This is not deception. It is boundary setting. If you are going through a difficult phase, looking composed and organized signals that the situation is temporary, not defining. If you are winning, appearing calm and understated prevents unnecessary friction. Loud wealth humiliates others, and humiliation has a long memory. True financial strength doesn't announce itself. It shows up in freedom of choice, in patience, and in the ability to walk away without explanation. When you keep your financial situation unclear, you protect yourself from parasites who want access and from rivals who want your position. Money in social life is not just currency, it's leverage. Once revealed, that leverage can be used against you. The smartest move is to keep it contained until there is a reason to deploy it. Let people sense stability without seeing proof. Let them feel capability without being able to measure it. Ambiguity keeps attention neutral and intentions hidden. Wealth that whispers lasts longer than wealth that performs. In public, numbers invite noise. Silence preserves control. Rule 6. Never gossip or speak badly about others. Gossip feels social, even harmless, but it quietly dismantles your credibility piece by piece. There is a rule that never fails. Anyone who speaks badly about someone else in front of you will speak badly about you when you are gone. The moment you participate, you pay a price most people never notice. You lose trust because others mark you as unsafe. You lose status because gossip signals insecurity and boredom. And you lose informational power because information is leverage, and you just gave it away for free. Strong people understand this instinctively. They listen carefully. They remember what is said, and they choose silence. That silence is not emptiness. It is control. Think about how you feel when someone shares private stories or harsh judgments about a mutual acquaintance. Even if you nod, a doubt forms instantly. If they're comfortable saying this to me, what are they saying about me? That doubt never disappears, and it poisons relationships slowly. Machiavelli warned that a person seeking power must avoid being despised, and nothing generates quiet contempt faster than someone who spreads stories. Speaking badly about others makes you look reactive, emotional, and small. Silence does the opposite. It creates uncertainty. It forces people to watch their words around you. When you become the person who hears everything but repeats nothing, the room changes. Conversations become cautious. Behavior becomes restrained. People start assuming you know more than you reveal, and that assumption alone creates distance and respect. This does not mean you are naive or disconnected. On the contrary, you often see patterns others miss because you aren't busy performing or bonding through negativity. In public life, the most powerful position is not to speak the most, but to be the one whose words are rare. When you stop gossiping, you stop leaking your position. Silence makes others uneasy because they can't measure you. And what cannot be measured cannot be easily controlled. Rule 7. Never explain your life philosophy in public. Declaring your personal code may feel honest or inspiring, but it quietly sets a trap for you. The moment you announce your standards out loud, you hand the world a checklist and invite it to watch you fail. When you say things like, "I live a disciplined life," or "I never lie," you are no longer simply living. You are performing. And performance attracts scrutiny. All it takes is one bad day, one lapse in judgment, one human mistake, and suddenly you are no longer seen as imperfect. but as fraudulent. People stop observing your progress and start waiting for your collapse. Machiavelli understood this weakness clearly. He advised appearing virtuous, not declaring virtue, because rigidity in words destroys flexibility in action. Life is unpredictable, and public standards leave you no room to adapt without being accused of betrayal. Think about how people react to those who constantly explain their mindset, routines, or moral frameworks. At first, it sounds impressive. Over time, it becomes tiring. Eventually, it becomes ammunition. Every deviation is magnified. Living your philosophy quietly avoids this danger. When your behavior speaks consistently, people begin to notice without being invited to judge. They don't ask, is he living up to his words? They ask, how does he stay so composed? That shift matters. Silence protects you from unnecessary exposure and preserves your freedom to grow without spectators. This doesn't mean you lack principles. It means your principles are strong enough to survive without explanation. The most convincing philosophy is not spoken, it is observed. When you stop preaching your values, you remove the spotlight from your flaws and place it on your results. Live first, act consistently. Let others connect the dots on their own. Curiosity builds respect far more effectively than self-description ever could. Rule 8. Never seek validation or approval. The desire for validation feels natural, almost harmless. But in public life, it quietly rearranges the hierarchy around you. The moment you seek approval, you place yourself beneath the people you are asking. The one who waits to be judged is always weaker than the one doing the judging. This isn't about arrogance or ignoring feedback. It's about refusing to outsource your self-worth. When you scan faces to see if people agree, soften your opinions to fit the room. Or fish for reassurance after you speak, you hand control of your confidence to others. Machiavelli understood that authority begins where the need to be liked ends. A person who requires approval cannot act freely, because every decision must pass through the filter of acceptance. Ironically, when you stop trying to be liked, attention shifts toward you. People are drawn to those who seem internally anchored. Calm self-respect creates gravity. Think about the difference between someone who constantly seeks affirmation and someone who remains steady regardless of reaction. One feels needy, the other feels grounded. Validation creates a silent power dynamic in every interaction. Praise lifts you only as high as criticism can later drop you. If compliments can energize you, insults can dismantle you. That volatility makes you easy to manipulate. Independence from both praise and criticism creates stability. This doesn't mean becoming cold or indifferent. It means measuring yourself by your own standards instead of the crowd's response. When your focus shifts inward, your presence changes outward. You speak more clearly, pause without discomfort, and stop performing for permission. People sense that shift immediately. Respect follows those who don't chase it. Approval-seeking leaks power. Self-respect concentrates it. When you no longer need to be liked, you become interesting. When you no longer need validation, you become difficult to control. And in public spaces, that quiet independence is one of the strongest signals of strength you can project. Rule 9. Never expose your wounds in public. The world is not a therapy room, even though modern culture often pretends it is. When you publicly reveal your deepest fears, unresolved trauma, or emotional fractures, you may believe you are being brave or authentic. But public spaces do not operate on compassion. They operate on hierarchy, leverage, and memory. When you say things like, "I'm insecure," or "I'm afraid of being abandoned," you think you are inviting understanding. A predatory mind hears instructions. It hears where to apply pressure, what threat will bend you, and how to gain control with minimal effort. This doesn't mean everyone is malicious, but it does mean the information you reveal doesn't disappear. Once spoken, it circulates. Machiavelli understood that power requires armor. Exposure without protection is not honesty. It is vulnerability without strategy. A wound shown too early becomes a handle others can grab. It doesn't invite care. It invites testing. This is not an argument for pretending you feel nothing or denying your inner battles. It is an argument for timing and containment. Healing is a private process. It happens in the dark, with people who have earned access through loyalty, discretion, and consistency. Public confession, on the other hand, turns pain into spectacle. There is a critical difference between a wound and a scar. A wound is still open, reactive, and easily manipulated. A scar tells a story of survival. One invites exploitation, the other commands respect. Share scars, not wounds. Teach lessons, not pain. Think about leadership, influence, or even simple social presence. A person who is actively bleeding in public cannot carry others through uncertainty. They may receive attention, but not authority. The king does not walk naked through the marketplace, not because he is superior, but because the crown and cloak symbolize order and stability. When you enter public spaces, you are not required to display your inner chaos. You are required to appear whole. Wholeness creates safety. Safety creates trust. Trust creates respect. Keep your wounds covered until they have healed. When they become scars, let them speak quietly on your terms. When you stop doing these 9 things, the change doesn't announce itself loudly, but it is immediately felt. You speak less. You explain less. You react less. And people notice. Some will ask if you're okay, if something is wrong, if you've changed. What they are really reacting to is the absence of the version of you they were comfortable with. The old version was easy to read, easy to predict, and easy to influence. That version filled silences, justified decisions, and gave emotional access freely. Do not return to that. The quiet you are building is not emptiness, it is mass. In that silence, you begin to create gravity. You stop leaking information, stop feeding unnecessary reactions, and start observing instead of performing. Slowly, your perspective shifts. You begin to see patterns in how people seek attention, how they test boundaries, how they reveal themselves when they think no one is watching. Once you see the game clearly, you cannot unsee it. And once you understand the game, you are no longer a piece being moved across the board. This is where power becomes lonely. Distance forms naturally when you stop explaining yourself and stop asking to be understood. Fewer people feel entitled to your inner world. Fewer people know how to provoke you. That distance can feel uncomfortable at first, especially if you are used to constant interaction and feedback. But that space is where strength consolidates. Power is not loud. It is not crowded. It does not beg to be seen. Power is selective, contained, and calm. When you hold that line, respect recalibrates without negotiation. Conversations change. People choose their words more carefully. Boundaries appear without being stated. And one day, you realize something fundamental has shifted. You are no longer reacting to the game. You are watching it. And from that position, you choose when to step in and when to remain still.